Hello, everybody. We're very excited today because we're starting a very special podcast. And in this podcast, we will be talking about internal family systems, emotionally focused therapy, and spirituality, because both treatment techniques are really deeply connected to spiritual dimensions, have spiritual roots. And we believe that by pointing out to some similarities and talking about those similarities and differences, we can help many therapists out there to integrate those approaches. And we also hope we can help clients to understand a little bit better how those approaches working and maybe inspire people who never heard about IFS and EFT to learn more and maybe get a training and also to become part of this wonderful therapeutic community. So, I'm gonna pass this to Kim, and Kim, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit who you are and say a couple words about your practice.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Lana. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Kim, and I have a private psychotherapy practice in Nashua, New Hampshire, but I am licensed in Massachusetts and Michigan as well. I provide internal family systems therapy, psychotherapy, which we'll be talking about today. I also utilize EMDR, and I will combine the methods together. In addition to that, I have some holistic practices that I do that, either on the side or sometimes a little bit adjunct to therapy, such as mediumship or Akashic Records reading. I do those a little bit separate, but sometimes spirits show up in therapy, and we can talk about that.
And of course, we hope we can find language that help clients who may be not a big believers, and maybe never even kind of had an spiritual experiences before to really, understand what it means energetically. Okay, I'll just gonna say a couple words about myself. And I'm also a therapist in private practice. I have office in Massachusetts, in Westford, Massachusetts. And I'm mostly working with couples, but I also have some individual clients in my practice. I am certified emotionally focused therapist. I am also trained in IFS and systemic family constellation approach, and I am facilitating individual family constellation sessions for my clients. Family constellation is a therapeutic modality that helps to explore our connection to our roots, to our ancestors, and see how certain patterns that we have in life, sometimes connected to this very rich history that we all have, cultural and social. And family constellation approach helps to access and acknowledge and shift those patterns in a way that might not always be possible to do with therapy that's working with memories that we created in our life and things that we know about ourselves and people around us. Kim, I'm gonna pass it to you. And again, can you say a little bit more about spiritual dimension of IFS?
Right, right. Yeah. Thanks, Lana. Yeah. First, I'll just, for anyone who doesn't know what internal family systems is, I'll just give a very brief overview. Internal family systems therapy is an evidence-based practice, and it was developed in the early 1980s by Richard C. Schwartz. And it was based on, it first started as an individual therapy model. And it's what psychologists, it's a systems approach. And psychologists, would point out that we all have different, sub-personalities or different ego states. And there are some therapies also very similar to the IFS that are developed around that. And a part is really, you may have said to yourself, well, part of me feels this way and part of me feels that way about the same thing. And what that really is your patterns of thinking on certain things, your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors on certain things. And these states of mind get into conflict with one another, and can become polarized. And you may notice, like, oh, I just can't decide, or I have this inner conflict going. And often that leads to a wound somewhere in your past. There's a wound there. And what we work with in internal family systems therapy is helping you identify that by working with parts. And the wound gets healed, and it can feel like a miracle when it's healed. But really, it's a rebalancing of your inner system, or perhaps there's the spiritual dimension as you're connecting. What is healing is your own inner healing ability, which we call the self in IFS. We say it's akin to like the soul in Christianity, or the higher self in Buddhism, for example. If you were looking metaphysically, you might say, oh, the self is located in the seventh, eighth, ninth chakras, if you believe in those energy centers. Um, and that when you connect with that, you're really connecting with your own inner wisdom. And I already forgot what you asked me because I was coming to that. I was going to answer your question. I
Yeah,
forgot.
yeah. I think, what I would like to do, I'm gonna just summarize what you said because it's very important, and especially maybe for people who just learning about EFT and IFS, this idea of multiplicity of mind, right? It's not new. It was around for a long time, but those two approaches really look at this closely. And when we're looking at individual person, we can see, if we're using those approaches, that we don't have just a single way of thinking and single way of behaving, right? In different circumstances, we can have very different reactions to the same trigger, to the same thing, right? And we can hear different stories in our minds. And those different states of experiencing things and feeling things, that's what IFS calls parts, right?
Right,
And
right.
many people experience situations where they have like opposing thoughts and feelings, where they just kind of look at something and just like, I feel this and I feel this, and it's so different, and it's still me, right? And it's kind of an experience of two parts inside of us clashing, right? Two parts holding different experiences,
Yeah.
but not being able to agree, not being able to find balance.
Right, right.
And another very important idea is this idea of rebalancing, finding balance in the system, right? How we even arrive at this balance and who helps us to find this balance. Because if both parts equally strong and both parts believe they're doing right things, right? Then, how are we going to go to this part? And this is where you were talking about the self-energy, right? This is spiritual aspect of connecting to something that's little bit like higher, a little bit deeper than like our surface experiences that we're having with things around us. Is this right? Am I getting it right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah. And I'm also just reminded of how couples become polarized. And often, as you can probably speak to, couples sometimes are holding a very similar wound within themselves, a similar negative belief about themselves, like I'm not important, for example, is a very common one, or I'm worthless. And they spend a lot of time, as couples, we spend a lot of time defending against those wounds getting activated, and the couple becomes polarized. Is that a similar experience with EFT, or?
Well, in many ways, when we're working with couples, especially with couples who right now in a state of conflict, right, or hurting for whatever reason, we really seeing those, very defensive parts activated and clashing with each other. And the more one part tries to pull up a certain defense, and it can be like maybe harsh, angry words. Another part can also respond with anger or with coldness and withdrawal. And whatever one part does, another part does it more, and it's becoming this never-ending cycle. So in EFT, we call it cycles. We call it demon dialogues.
Yeah.
And I want to say a little bit about Sue Johnson, wonderful person who developed this model. She passed away last year, unfortunately. But she really brought this model to the level where it was really scientifically validated. It's at this point, EFT have a highest success rates for couples. So we can really say confidently that this type of therapy works. But again, what EFT does in many ways similar to IFS, because when we're looking at what's happening in therapy room between couples, we're not trying to change one partner or another partner. We're trying to understand this energy that they co-creating, this energy of negative cycle, right? How it's being sustained, right? What those parts that feeling defensive, in the moment doing to create this, what they believe is a protection, but in a way it's also kind of like a very rigid shell that prevents, growth. And then as we're working with our couples and when we're using EFT method, we're trying to really step out of this very rigid and protective way of experiencing each other to a more vulnerable state, which only possible when we can create safety in the room. And again, the energy of safety is an energy of maybe kindness, softness, and love. I do feel in many ways when we're doing it, we're also accessing a lot of this self energy that Kim, you just described, right?
Yeah.
That, without this access, it's impossible to feel safety in the midst of the conflict.
Yeah, and the self, we say in internal family systems therapy, the self is made up of 8 qualities. And those qualities are curiosity, uh, compassion, calmness, confidence, connected, creative,
Mhm,
clarity. Um,
mhm.
there may be one other that I
I think I said it all,
yeah,
right? And
yeah, yeah. And set state. It's just when I first accessed it, when I had a very healing moment with it, it was really transformative. It was incredible. I would say I see many of my clients have that experience too. And then later, maybe it's not so like, wow, but when parts connect with self, it's just, like I said, it's like a miracle happens. It's like instant healing. And even when people can access more self energy, I work with individual adults. They go home and their dynamic begins to change with their spouse, partner, family members, friends. And the best evidence is when someone says, "Wow, you seem so different. What's happening with you?" Or the client comes back to me and says, "Wow, Kim, I knew this was the moment that I was supposed to like explode or blow up or get mad or be panicked or have anxiety, all those things that come to me to try to resolve, and it didn't happen." And
Mhm.
the state of adjustment of like, wow, what am I supposed to do now? This is so strange. So there's a little bit of an adjustment pattern, and I always love that time because we get to review the progress and um,
And in one of my IFS trainings, I came across this analogy that really I kind of, because I'm a visual person, I like to carry inside that the self a little bit like sun, that we have inside it always there, but sometimes it get covered by clouds, right? And
love that analogy.
yeah,
Yes.
and we actually might start to even, you know, worry that we don't have this energy inside, that it's only this warmth and love and or maybe like centeredness or self-assurance can only come from the outside, right?
Mhm.
And what IFS and EFT helps clients to see that we know the way to moving clouds apart so you
Mhm.
can see this internal, very grounded, very wise energy inside yourself. And then from this can start to grow like a new way of experiencing yourself, experiencing your partner. And then once you just, saw the glimpse of it, the work is structured around how to help this energy to be more present,
Wow, that's really beautiful.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So then your relationship can be much more healing versus stuck in those negative cycles. That's
Yes.
exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's almost like, and Kim, please tell me if it's right. It's almost like in both approaches, the first stage is actually find the self energy and connect with it. And for maybe clients who experienced a lot of trauma, had a lot of traumatic experiences, this process of accessing self energy can be slow. It might not happen in the first session, right?
Right.
And
Right.
the same thing with, with couple therapy, when you have couple where both clients, is it trauma situation where both clients bringing trauma, it takes time to create safety, to create this small window between those clouds so self energy can be seen.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
when it happens, then we kind of moving into next stage of
Hmm.
therapy, right? Because like once, whether it's individual client or couples, once they get access to it, they know it's there. There is more hope.
Hmm.
And and again, and then it's becoming more like deepening this tender loving connection, right? Helping it to be more present, helping it to be more available at the time of conflict. And sometimes it's hard to say ahead of time, right, how long each
I
stage is
love
going to take
Right.
for each client.
Right. And IFS is a very, as I'm sure EFT is, a very respectful model. So we actually, wow, if we could get to self in the first session, holy smokes. I know you weren't implying that we do, but wow, that would be, but we work, and maybe EFT does the same thing, right? We work like really we're getting to know parts and appreciating their roles and getting their permission to move towards what is wounded, the most vulnerable parts. And the wounding usually happens, prior to age 5 for the majority of the deepest wounds, throughout childhood or some in teen years. But and throughout that process, we've made some incredible spiritual discoveries as well. It isn't just the self that's been healing. Sometimes we will find very unique things that appear to be spirit guides, for example, spirit animals, signs or symbols. I've had with one person, or I've seen a couple times, even fairies show up. Now, these are part of what we might call, what Carl Jung referred to in Jungian psychology or analysis as the collective unconscious. So the tie between these are that IFS gives us a way to actively work with the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious are those signs and symbols and archetypes um, that seem to be, have universal meaning. And it's fascinating because let's say a fox shows up for a client. That seems like that seems to be a common one sometimes. And somebody has turned, we go into a little bit of a meditative state. So someone may be um, in their system noticing their parts and, oh, a fox just showed up, they might tell me. And if we look that up, it inevitably will match exactly what that person or that part needed, the spiritual meaning of a fox, that person needed at that time. And it's just like astounding. I wouldn't believe this stuff if I hadn't seen it again and again and again.
Know how it feels because I'm doing IFS too, but I also feel maybe it's a good moment to point out little bit differences, between EFT and IFS. So when we using EFT, especially in the first stage of treatment, there is a lot of like very strong, protective energy. And we cannot always go as deep as, IFS, let's say, goes, right, with an individual clients, because the role actually is help those protectors or wounded parts. That's what IFS call to feel a little bit safer with a protector of another partner. What we do, and maybe this is another similarity with IFS, is we work with clients' body, with physical body, with what they're experiencing inside. And some clients might be able to describe it very well and name it very well. For others, it's actually a process because they have been disconnected for such a long time, right? And like their body and their mind not communicating. They're just thinking about their emotions. They're not experiencing them. But
Mm.
as we building safety, it's really important to establish this connection, right? So we might not see a fox, right? Like
Yeah.
when we're closing eyes and trying to connect with our bodies, but we might really like identify, those tingling or hot or cold feelings, or feel like we want to almost like crawl in a ball, or we opening up, when maybe our partner looking at us in a certain way. So EFT helps to notice those moments, and EFT helps to incorporate those physical sensations and, bodily feelings into therapy work.
Mm. Yeah, very important. Yeah. And somehow EFT opened up a spiritual dimension for you as well.
I think my interest in spirituality started a long time ago with like Stanislav Grof's interpersonal psychology, expressive therapists. I got training in expressive therapist too, and Reiki. I am level 2 Reiki practitioner. But when I graduated from BU School of Social Work, this is where Kim and I actually met first. We didn't like, except for one course connected to spirituality, we didn't have much of, this kind of training and experience. And I guess I was searching for it after graduation. And I also wanted to get more experience in understanding how to work with couples. So
Mm.
I would say I landed almost accidentally on my first EFT workshop. But the moment, I kind of started to experiencing the teaching method, because it's experiential, it's actually invite therapists to use your body, your emotional system to really resonate with each partner in the couple. I just like knew that it's my style. I knew that it actually goes much deeper, that, any type of just cognitive behavioral therapy, which is great, right? CBT is great and everybody should know this, right? But if we're really aiming at healing attachment injuries and trauma, we really need to go deeper. We really need to use, therapist as an instrument who can really feel on a very deep level what client experiencing.
Yes, yeah, that's well said. Yeah. Yes, and IFS goes to the same place CBT goes to, but kind of I tell people that it kind of more permanently changes the beliefs. You don't have to continue to do worksheets or remind yourself, or if you do remind yourself like, oh yeah, I am good enough and here's all the ways, it sticks a lot easier. And also when wounds are released, you begin to see that other people's um, pain and suffering is theirs and it's not yours. It's not attaching to your system. And this is actually also how discovered some spirit attachments in people. So we could go into that in a later episode, but
I know, it's just like we keep kind of like planting,
yeah,
ideas, and we have so many interesting things we want to share with you. But I don't know, like, is there something important that maybe we want to add to today's introduction? What do you
yeah,
think?
that even you don't have to believe in those things at all to or see them that way in order to get the best of internal family systems therapy. But for me, it's just more of my personal belief because of what I've seen. IFS really opened up a lot of intuition for me because which was blocked by some heavy duty shame from trauma. IFS gave me a way to continually work with my system as well as with the intuitive side. And really, now when I do reading to people, that spiritual side as well. So it's a mind, body, spirit method of therapy.
I think it's actually probably very good way to kind of like connect all those things together, that EFT and IFS, we both believe working on those levels, right? It's our mind, it's our body, it's our emotional system, and it's also something that, goes a little bit above, outside of who we are. It's some things that guide us spiritually, some things that can point out in a direction of healing. And Kim witnessed it in her practice, and I witnessed it many times, that clients that maybe have been trying other forms of therapy, right? And they were tuning certain things, but problems would go back again and again and again. And sometimes we need to go a little bit deeper underneath of what we can see on the surface to really really shift the pattern of relationship. This is what EFT trying to do, and lay foundation for a new way of, relating to most important people in our lives. And for IFS, it's lay foundation for a new way of relating to yourself. Right? For a new way of being with yourself in moments where you feel afraid, where you feel maybe incompetent, where you feel lost, where you feel scared, right? So it's like both therapies are relational therapies. It's just one therapy helps you to connect with yourself. And IFS also have couples component. We need to say a couple words about this. And and EFT also have individual component too, but initially, this is how it started, right? EFT relational approach that was helping couple, and IFS, it was an individual approach that was helping client to heal and connect with themselves. Would it be okay for us to say to our listeners that we welcome questions? And, we will continue sharing with you our insights, maybe good books, good information, and we're planning to go back to you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lana.
Yes, thank you so much, Kim.